I struggled mightily, but I am not surprised because I'm not as experienced with all these Excel formulas, but the cards that you provided helped a lot. And I didn't actually try to recreate this report, but I created something else, and that was a little bit easier, but so I'm getting there.
Okay. Okay, so Mary had mentioned that she wanted sorts covered again. Is there particular questions around sorts or just to cover it in general?
I feel like that some of the reports that I've tried to make that I have caused myself issues by either not putting in sorts or putting them in like the wrong order, or so I just wanted to recover how they impact the reports I'm creating. And I don't have an example.
Well, and that honestly is really going to depend on the report that you're building. So
Okay.
The way that I like to look at sorts is to try to think about the natural sort order of how the system or how the data goes into the system, right? So when you add a lease to AMT Direct, the first thing that you do is you provide some general lease data. What's the lease name? What lease code are you giving it? When does the lease start? When does it end? And some general things like that. Well, now you can't add a recurring charge to the system, as an example, for a lease that doesn't have that general information criteria set up, right? So let's just, and I won't save it, but let's just say we were going to add a lease to the system. Okay. So I'm just going to open up a lease form, and I'm not going to save this to the system, but I just want you to kind of generally see it. And let's say that we're going to say, okay, it's a brand new property, it's a brand new lease. The first two things that you have to set up is a little bit of general property information and a little bit of general lease information. Can you add a recurring charge? No, you cannot. You can't until you put in some basics, right? Then it'll let you add more information, okay? So would you try to first sort by recurring charge? That wouldn't make sense, right? Because the system and the report's going to want to know, well, what lease does it belong to? What suite does it belong to? So think of sorting in a report in the same type of manner, right? Does it make sense to first sort by recurring charge type when the report's not going to know, well, which lease do you want it to be on the line with, right? So I like to give general advice that when you're sorting, think of how the data goes in the system. So some very common general sort orders that I like to put in most of the reports that I develop would be lease code as my first sort, suite as my second, because I could have a lease that has multiple suites. And I could have a lease that has multiple suites that in each of those suites could have multiple charge types. So I would probably go lease code, suite number, charge type. And then when you create a charge type and you enter in your recurring charge rental activity, that could have rent bumps over a 5-year term. The system then in turn creates a payment schedule that provides you the payment for every period, whether that is a monthly period or a quarterly period or an annual period. So if I was building a report based off of recurring charge payment schedule, I would probably want my sort order to be first, put the sort by lease code, then by suite number, then by charge type, and then by period. So my results would be lease code 1, suite A, charge type base rent, period January 21, right? And then it would give me my next base rent of February 21, March 21. Then it would go to charge type CAM for January 21, February 21. If I had 2 suites and I had suite B, it would then show me lease code 1, suite B, charge type base rent, period January 21, period February 21, etc. So then the report makes complete sense based on the sort order I've given it. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That helps a lot.
Okay, so another general rule is try not to sort by something that is not required in the system and could have null values. So I have a lot of customers when it comes to options, they want to sort by the notice end date, not the option start and not the option end, but the notice end date. Well, that's not a required field. And they may have 50% of their population with null values. And then it's not understood, well, my report doesn't seem to be sorting properly. Well, because you've sorted by a field that's not required, does not have a full population of data, and there's a lot of nulls. So you're going to get the nulls first, then it's going to start your sort order, right? Because it's null. So that's would be the first sort, right? It's blank. So try not to use a sort that doesn't have a full population of data. So if I was doing an option report and I wanted to sort by notice end date, but I know that not all of my options have a populated notice end date, I would probably put logic in the field that said, if this field is null, return the expiration date, right? Or the option end date, something like that, so that my report had a full population and it gave a logical sort. Does that make sense? So I first try to sort by something that's required, and I know I will not have null values. So that's another kind of tip. Any questions on that? You guys still there?
Yeah, I have to stay on mute though because I got work going on outside.
That's okay. That's okay.
It'd be overly distracting.
Another major thing to take into consideration with sorts, which is what we were working on in our last session, is are you going to want to build a report that uses group footers or group headers that are 100% reliant on your sort order? Because a group footer or a group header has to have a sort to tell the report what to put in that footer or header. So in the example that we worked on, whoops, we're right here, was we wanted a row for every payment type. Now that doesn't mean we're only going to get one row for base rent and only one row for CAM, for example. And that's because we first sorted by lease code, then suite, then charge type. So for every lease code and suite, we'll get a row for each payment in that lease and suite. Does that make sense? If I hadn't sorted by lease code first and then suite, I would only get one row for each charge type in the system. And that's not what we're looking for. Would you like to see that kind of play out? Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do that. We'll use the report that we started building together in our last session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up into the sort order and I'm going to remove lease code and space. Okay. And then I'm going to run this report. And after our call, because I know we only went through a few, copying over a few columns for different periods that we worked on, I went ahead and fully finished populating it. So we should see all 24 months that we included in our calculations. So while this is executing, other than sort, any other topics? Because we're mostly going to work on how to build in additional logic and categories. Because remember, we started off slow, right? We only included 2 categories. Now we're going to build in additional categories and additional possible filters and add columns to the report. So Mary, I know you mentioned you have some background noise, so you're staying on mute, and I have my puppy sitting at the door whining at me because he's not beside me. So we all have to live through our pets interrupting our work days. And this might take just a minute or so to execute. It's a pretty big report. I think what I'll do is I'm going to go grab a sample so that when we're testing, we can just have like it executing for one lease instead of the entire database. So let's use this file ID. Well, let's just make sure that, okay, 2023, perfect. So I'm just going to copy this and we'll filter the report. Oh, we already have it filtered down. Never mind. Question for you guys so that I can actually present this well. Do you know of a particular lease that has more than one suite that has a FASB schedule?
Yes, I can think of one. Do the suites each have different schedules?
They do.
Okay. 6-8, go into the Indianapolis Suburban.
Go where?
Indianapolis Suburban. You want a file ID? What do you want me to give you?
File ID is fine.
Okay. It's going to be
I just want to first double check to make sure it actually has,
yeah.
for each one.
IN dot Stonegate, all one word, .1.
What was the name?
IN
Mm-hmm.
Indiana dot Stonegate, all one word.
Let's just start with that.
Yeah. There's 3. Yep, we've got 3 suites.
Perfect. So let's make sure got it right. All right, so we have sortable period and lease code. Okay. Let's rerun that. Let's see, are they all the same charge type? Yes. Okay, we got one row. That doesn't look right, does it? We have one lease with 3 suites with a schedule for each base rent real estate. But when we ran the report, we got one line. Does anybody know why? Because I removed lease code and suite from my sort order and I'm starting it at payment type. So it thinks I just want a footer for BRNRE with an aggregate for BRNRE. That's not what I want. So I'm going to add back my lease code in the proper order and my space in the proper order, lease code space, then payment type, then period. And we'll rerun the report. And now we should have 3 rows. It's one lease, but it has 3 spaces, creating 3 schedules. Ah, that's exactly what we wanted, because we wanted to absolutely identify that this lease has 3 separate spaces, creating 3 separate schedules. When we had removed the sort of lease code first, then space, then payment, and we started with just payment, it aggregated all 3 of those to one row. So this information may not be accurate because it's showing space, yet we didn't sort by that. So that's not just space 1B, it's all the spaces aggregated. So that's how you can end up with inconsistencies in what you're looking at versus what you're expecting. And it's simply because you didn't sort it correctly. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a minute, let you guys absorb that. So proper sort order, we have 3 lines as expected. We removed lease code and space, so we ended up with just 1 row, but this suite doesn't, or space doesn't properly correlate to the fact that we aggregated it based on our sort order. Any questions? And does that make sense? Anyone?
It makes sense to me. I don't know where everybody else is on this. On this.
How about everybody else? Let's get some participation and making sure that more than one person is understanding the concept we just talked about.
Makes sense to me too.
Great. Okay. So we're gonna get rid of this because this is actually what we anticipated. And as I mentioned, I added in the full 12 months, right? So I added additional columns. Remember what we talked about in our last session, that once we got the first set of logic correct, then I just had to copy it and modify the adding to the months that I wanted to look at based on my filter values. So from the report showing next year's 12 months, right? So starting with period 12 and going out to, whoops, period 23. Remember we talked last week, when you're doing this logic and you're using a filter value, the first month of that filter value is month 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That would give you year 1, and then 12 through 23 would give you year 2, 24 through 35, year 3, and so on, right? So it's not your natural 1 through 12, 13 through 24, because it starts at 0. Look at the filter and return that filter value plus 0, which would give you that filter value's first period, and then add a period, add a period, add a period. So that's what we've done with this logic. So to see next year, because we started our filter with 1/1/21 through 12/22, we wanted to show the year of 2022 in period increments, then with a total for those 12 months, and then we just wanted an aggregate of 2021 in one column. So what these columns are doing is it's going out and it's looking at my filter value. It's also looking at my lease classification in case in the future, or even if I currently have both operating and non-operating leases, right? Operating and finance. So we did a logical if statement, an if and, that says, if and the filter value equals, or if the sortable period, I'm sorry, equals the filter value plus 23 months, and the lease classification equals operating, return the net lease expense operating. If it equals finance, return the net lease expense finance. So that's what our logic is doing individually for 12 periods. Now, when I wanted to aggregate 12 periods together, I just changed my operator from equals to greater than month 11, meaning give me 12 through 23, right? And then for the column that's going to present 2021, I know that that's 0 through 11. So again, my operator, instead of being equals to, is give me less than month 12 from the filter value. That then presents January through December 22, the total for 22, and then the total for 21, which is what Mary expects this report to do. But we had to build logic in the cell because it's not going to naturally put it in columns, it's going to put it in rows. We needed to flip that into columns to make it a much smaller report, having one line item per schedule in the sort order of lease code, space, charge type, and then we used periods so that, you know, when we did this logic, it would think logically. And that's as far as we got. All right, well, all we did was build a report using the FASB revision category and the FASB schedule category. This is great. I've got a lot of information so far, but there's more that I need. I need things from my lease groupings. I need stuff from my recurring charges. I need this allocated. So we need to keep modifying this report to get it to exactly what we need it to do. But we talked about, don't try to renovate your entire kitchen in one day. Paint your cabinets first, then go pick out your countertops, then install your appliances. We're doing the same thing with this report. We're going to take it step by step. So I think the next thing that we will do is we will add the lease groupings so that we can add in some of those additional columns of information that need to be provided on the report. Well, how do I do that? I'm not in a wizard anymore. I'm not selecting my categories. So where do I go to get the categories and be able to add more? That's going to be done in report options, the gear icon, categories. So I'm going to select categories. I can see the two that are in use right now that we've built the report with so far. But now I want to go and add my groupings. Groupings fall under Portfolio Insight, Groupings. Well, heck, they're grayed out. What do I do? Why are they grayed out? Anybody know why they're grayed out? Cannot select them.
You think you have to do lease general information first?
They're grayed out, correct. They're grayed out because there's no direct relationship between lease or location groups and the FASB schedule or the FASB revision. The tables have to join together using a primary key and a logical, sensible join on how the data works in the system. And when you don't go into FASB and create a schedule and then attach groupings to it, you add a location and a lease and add groupings to it. So you would need to bring in those categories and create that proper relationship. So if we expand on lease, for example, lease general information is available for selection. So we can go ahead and add that because that has a direct relationship with the FASB schedule. Now, if we go back up to our groups, notice that lease groups is now available because the report's saying, okay, we're making sense now. We've got FASB, just added lease. There's a relationship between FASB and lease, and there is a relationship between lease groups and lease general information. So now it's going to allow us to add it. So we've just added 2 categories. So now we can start using fields that are available. Apparently I did not add the groupings, so I'm going to go back and do that. I thought I clicked it. Let's do that again. There we go. So now that I've actually added it, those fields are available that I can add to the report. I can filter by them. I can sort by them. Any questions with adding additional categories so that the fields in those categories are now available to me, and doing it by bringing in the appropriate categories to create the relationships.
Nope, so far so good.
Okay. I'm going to pop over to the one that I already built because I don't remember. So we got joint venture. That might be the only one. Yep, that looks like that might be the only lease group. Oh, no, 2. Lease group 3 and lease group 6. Nope, 3. Payment type, lease type, and joint venture. Okay. So I'm going to insert 3 columns, very similar to Excel. I'm going to insert them after lease status. You, of course, can place them wherever you would like, but for demonstration purposes, we'll just add them after lease status. Now, one thing when you're not in the wizard and you're adding afterwards, and when you're in the report designer, is it will not automatically add your column header for you. You will have to do that manually. And that's okay. It's very easy to do. And you would add your actual field from the new categories that you've added in your, in this case, footer section. So it was, we needed payment type. So I'm going to add payment type there. I think it was type and joint venture were the three that we wanted included in the report from the lease groups category that we just added. Now I can type in payment type and then go and format and all that great stuff. But if I hold my control key and drag lease status over and then double click and retype the text that I would want, that I would like, it will copy the formatting. So that is just a personal preference, how you like to use the tool. You can absolutely 100% simply just type and then go use the formatting bar to make sure that everything is formatted similar. All right, so we just added lease general information and lease groups so that we could add those 3 items that were not available to us when we were working with just the FASB revision category and the FASB schedule category. In order to add lease groups, we had to first add lease general information to create the relationships between the reporting categories / think of them as tables in the system. Any questions on that? All right, so let's run the report and see what it looks like and compare that to our last run before we added the categories to make sure that did not manipulate any of our values that we were already satisfied with. Okay, I'm just gonna bring this over so that. Okay, so payment type, third-party payment, type, expense lease, joint venture, no. So those 3 columns were added. And looking at just this first column, 1164416, 161,99232, let's just pop to our last version and make sure that that looks the same. And it does. So I'm confident that the change that I just made to the report did not mess up my other information. Any questions, or do we want to walk through that entire process again? Okay, I'm going to take whenever there's silence as a no and move forward. I think I heard somebody pop in.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so now we have a report that contains 4 categories. We have it sorted. We're using a particular sort order to provide us with an aggregate footer. So we only get 1 row based on a lease, a space, and then a payment. But what is not included right now is allocations. You want this to consider the fact that these net lease expense amounts may be allocated to different departments. So now we're going to have to, 1, bring in the allocation category, 2, resort our report, change the group footer that we're using, and 3, multiply our current logic by the allocation percentage. So I'm going to leave these so we can look at them later. And I'm going to go back to report options, categories. Because remember, we started off with 2, we added 2 more, we tested our data, we made sure we did not break anything, everything still looks great, and then we moved on. Because if we do this and things don't work out, we know where the problem started, right? All right, so under portfolio insight, lease, no, where is it? No, what we're looking for is going to be under FASB manager, I believe. Leasing. Oh, it's not there either. Oh, it is under portfolio insight, lease, recurring charge, FASB allocation calculation. Well, what does that category provide me? I can always, before bringing it into my report, select it, hit the I, and it will give me a view of what that's going to give me. Well, it gives me an allocation code, an allocation description, a percentage, a department code, a department description, rounding. But what it does not give me is an actual allocated amount. So I'm going to have to calculate that allocated amount. But I can do that pretty easily by including this category. So I'm going to go ahead and include it. And I was able to include it because it has a relationship with the other categories that I'm using. And click OK. Now, if you have, and let's just look at our example that we have it was IN Stone. I'm going to bring that lease up. This one right here. Can you find me one that's not 100%? 100% is not going to be a good example. We want a lease that has at least a 50-50 split, or more is fine too, but I need one that's not 100%. Anybody know one off the top of their head?
But it's got to be multiple suites too, right?
No, because I'm gonna just add another lease code to our sample or file ID. It does not have to be, in this case, it does not have to be multiple suites. I think we've got the concept of lease code, space.
Okay, I think I can give you one then.
Okay.
BW MMPS. Oh, did I say bw.mmps.mob?
Let's take a quick look. See what we
It has a lot of allocations. Let me know if it's too many.
No, too many is not too many. Okay, so this is great. Just grab that lease code or file ID, as you guys call it, and I'm going to add that. So now we want to make a list of lease codes. So we want that one, And then we want our stone one as well. Perfect. Okay, so we've added allocations. Let's just, let's add some additional fields, even if you wouldn't want this in the final report, just so we can do some verification while we're building. So I'm going to go ahead and add, let's say right after payment type, 2 columns. One is going to be the department allocation code, and one will be the allocation percentage. And we know that we can get that information from the FASB allocation calculation. We've got our department code and we've got our percentage. Okay, do a little bit of quick formatting. Probably want to format that to 2 decimal places and append the percent sign. Okay, so we haven't added it to our numbers yet, but let's just see what happens when we run this report by adding the department allocation and the allocation percentage. We've added an additional file ID, so we're going to get results for our first sample that has 3 spaces, and we'll get results for our new lease that we added that has many allocations. Well, that's not right. I'm getting 7.58%, 13 or 1300 to 0021. Let's go back to our allocation screen. This makes no sense, right? Oh, I'm just getting 1. Anybody have any idea why? Because we are aggregated to the charge type. There's 1 row per charge type. All those allocations go to 1 charge type. So it's just still only going to give us 1 row. So what do we need to do? That's not what my results should be. I need a row now for every allocation. Department code. Well, I have to change my sort order in order for that to happen. And I have to change the way that my group footer is working, because charge type or payment type in this case is what it's called, is not going to work, because I'm only going to get for every lease that has a space that has this charge type 1 row. And this allocation has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I should have 11 rows for this lease, which is why I asked for one that was not just 100%, because one that's 100% will only have 1 row. So what I need to do is I need to go to my sorts and I have to determine the proper sort order placement. So lease code being first is still accurate. Space being second is still accurate. Payment type being third is still accurate. But I now need to sort by department code, and that needs to come after payment type and before period, because I can have a lease that has multiple spaces, that has a charge type, that has multiple allocations, and for each of those allocations, it can have multiple periods. So I'm going to just drag the department code over and move that up after payment type, but before sortable period. And click OK. Now, if I run the report again, I'm still not going to get the correct results, because it's still giving me my data based on the footer that I've designed, and I designed that footer to look at the payment type. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to modify our grouping or our group footer. Okay, I still only have 4 rows. I'm actually expecting 3 rows for the Stonegate lease because it has 3 suites, and I'm expecting 11 rows for my MMP South lease. So let's go back to the designer and learn how we can modify our group footer row to present our data based on the allocation department code. You can simply click on the footer section and then select modify. Because we have added that sort order, we can now select the sort order of department code. Click OK, and now the report knows, oh, you don't want to aggregate to the payment level, payment type level, you want to allocate to the department code level. So every lease that has a space, that has a FASB charge type, that has allocations, I will get that detail. And let's run that report. I should now have 11 and 3, 14 rows of data. Looking so much better right off the bat. Now remember, we did not change our values at all yet. We are just showing the lease information, the lease status, some of the groupings we brought in, the space, the payment type, the department allocation and percentage. That's looking so much better. I can do a quick comparison. 758, 340, 71, 815, 25. Pop back to the report. Yep, that's looking great. Ends in 240, ends in 240. Oh, that's fantastic. This one might not actually have a FASB schedule though in this time period. Not sure how well that's going to work out for us. It ends in 2021.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I think that you'll get the concept. Maybe while we're working, if somebody could find one that has 2022 data that has allocations, we can add another lease to our sample. I do want to point out something though. Notice that it says 496,29564 in each of the 14 rows. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's the total. So what we have to do is we have to add to our logic to take that total and multiply it by that percentage. So what we're going to do now is in each of these columns, and I'm not going to with this one yet, I'm not going to bother with 21 because we know that there's no 21 data. Let me get this out of my way. I'm just going to go over to the 2021 column, and at the end I'm going to say times allocation percentage. So now my logic is still looking for all the great stuff I need times allocation percentage. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that's actually not going to work because we have 2 logical tests in here. One is for if the classification is FASB financing, and one is if the classification is not FASB financing. So just adding it to the end is not correct. Where I need to add it is, and I'm going to open up the formula editor, it's a little easier to look at. I need to add it in each of my statements where I'm telling it to return the value. So ag sum if and my sortable period equals or is less than filter value 1 plus 12 months, and my lease classification does not equal FASB financing, return the net lease expense operating. This is where I need to do my times and then pull in my percentage. And you got to place it before the comma. And then I need to do it in my second logical statement where I'm saying, if it does equal FASB financing, return net lease expense FASB financing. So I'm going to do times and my allocation percentage and click OK. Now let's run the report again. Make sure we didn't mess up our syntax, because you can do that very easily when you're manipulating a formula, and that we get, instead of the total net lease expense value for the year of 2021, that we get it to our allocated percentages. Scroll all the way over. That looks so much better. No, wow. Did that escalate my amount like crazy? That's because I need to actually divide by 100, because the way the percentage comes in, I really need it to be multiplying by a decimal instead of, 4.20 or whatever the amount was. So I'm going to modify that formula again and add in, just going to put some brackets around that and then divide by 100. Normal Excel like stuff when you have to. That'll get me into a decimal for my percentage, if I did it right. Trial and error. That's looking a little better. If I downloaded this to Excel and I added those up, they should add up to my 496,295. And let's go ahead and do that just to double check. Has anybody found one that has 2021 or 2022 data? I mean, that has an allocation? 496,295.64. Perfect. Now I need to do that same thing to all the other columns that have logic in it. I need to build in that times the allocation divide by 100, times the allocation times divide by 100. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions on getting it by your allocation percentage. That was a lot of information. No one has any questions? So let's kind of reverse all the way back. So we started with just 3 rows, showing our spaces, and then we built in some allocation information and our groupings, but it didn't turn out correctly. because we needed to add the correct sort order, and then we needed to change our group footer to look at the actual allocation department code. And then we had to change our logic to multiply by the allocation percentage and divide by 100 to get it to a decimal place so that we could get the correct amount calculated in our columns. We only did it for demonstration purposes to the last column, but it would need to be done to every single column. Okay. All right. So I am going to close a bunch of these. Also, just kind of wanted to quickly point out that our other lease that had the 3 suites, there's still only 3 rows though, because the allocation is 100%. Let's make sure that those amounts, yep, we checked those amounts earlier. They look correct. Okay. The other thing with this particular report that we need to cover is the fact that you guys store some data at the recurring charge UDF level, company number, cost center, percentage, and you want some of those items, if not all of them, displayed on the report as well.
No, I don't, for expense leases, I don't think we need that. You're gonna always pull from the allocation. That when we do income leases, when we create a budget report for income, we'll need to pull that.
They were part of the, what you gave me, Mary, to put in the report. Company cost center and the GL.
Right, but that's
from the recurring charge. You don't need it though?
I think for this report, because we're intending that from the allocation, not for UDF. So it will only be on the income lease instead of come to UDF.
You completely broke up during your statements. I didn't understand anything you just said.
I think she was saying that's going to come from the allocation for expense leases. And then for income leases, we'll need that UDF. But for expense leases, for the expense one, for this one, we won't need the UDF.
Okay, so for this report, you don't need the UDF.
Yes, but for the income.
Because this is a FASB report and you wouldn't be able to run this for income anyways, right? Because there's no net lease expense in the income.
Right.
FASB. Okay, so then this report, once we had added in the allocations to each column, would be complete. I would probably add some additional information to the top of the report before finishing it up. And some of those items would come directly from the formula cards that I provided you. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up because I like to not have to rethink how to do formulas if I can copy. I'm going to use from the second card the report runtime number 3 because that's going to, I really don't want to help you improve Adobe right now. Because I like the way this particularly formats on the report. And I'm going to go ahead and add that into my header. And I'm probably going to want to format it. But I also want to add my filter values that I used. So I want to put in the report that even though you see it in the columns, I want the header to indicate that this report was run from January 1st, 2021 through December 2022. So I can build a little bit of logic in the header to do that as well. So let's just say I want some text first, because I want it to say, similar to my report runtime, I want it to say what it is that I'm displaying. So I'm going to say, let's say for the periods of, now text has to go in between single quotes. I want a colon and a space and then another single quote. So that's my text. And then to concatenate it with something else, I'm going to use the and. That's telling the report, okay, take this text and concatenate it. Now, what do I want to concatenate it with? I want to concatenate it with my filter value 1, 1. So I'm going to type filter value 1, 1. Now, the reason why it's 1, 1 is because it's an is between filter. So it has two values. It has the first value. It is the first filter in my filters. It has two values. I want this to display the first value, and then I want it to display the second value. So I want to also concatenate that with some text, and I want that to be a space, a dash, and a space. So I'm going to single quote, space, dash, space, single quote, and I want to concatenate that with filter value 1, 2, that last value. So I'm going to do, again, the and I'm going to type filter value 1, 2. I'm going to go ahead and merge this so that it doesn't wrap on me and it merges like my other column does, and make it bold as well. Whatever other formatting I wanted to do. So let's go ahead and run that and see how our new values in our header are going to present. It's going to tell us when we ran the report, and it's going to tell us for what periods we ran it for, based on what we populated upon execution in filter value 1, 1 and 1, 2. And the reason why, again, that it's 1, 1 and 1, 2 is because we used an operator of is between. I think I'll save it this time so my wrapping gets fixed. Okay, so for the periods of, oh, I don't like the way that's formatted. My report runtime is March 29th at 3:04 p.m. Perfect, but I really don't like the way that's formatted. It's got the text the way I want it, but I don't want my dates like that. So I'm going to tell this, instead of just providing me the value the way it just comes out, I'm going to tell it, let's pretend this is text, and I'm going to tell you how I want the value to come out as text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in here, and before my filter value, my first one, I'm going to write text, open paren, and after the filter value 1, 1, a comma, and then in single quotes, how I want it presented. So I want month, 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 comma, day, day, comma, year, 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 year. And then I'm going to close that logic. That's not actually what I want. Oh yeah, okay. Let's see how that turns out. And you can do it however, whatever format you wanted to do it in. You might just want it to show as a period. 01, 21 through 12, 22. We'll try a couple of different ways. See how it looks. Now we only did the first one. Okay, so that's a little better. I might want January completely spelled out. I may not want it to look like this at all. And then I definitely want to make sure I match filter value 1.1 and filter value 2.2's layout and formatting on exactly how I want it to display on the report. But you can see how you can manipulate how it displays by changing the logic of just displaying filter value 1.1 to, hey, I want you to display this as text and in the exact format that I defined for you. So let's change this and let's do month, / year. And I'm going to do the same thing for the second one this time. So again, text, print, comma, single quote, format, single quote, close the formula up, enter, run the report, check your results. If it's not what you wanted, modify, try again. Said I was going to save this and I didn't. Whoops. So now it's for the periods of January 21 through 12/22. Perfect. It's exactly the way I want it. It's got my report runtime. It's got all the fields that I need. It's allocating as I expect, except of course we need to go back and correct the other columns to bring in that allocation logic, timesing it by the allocation percentage and dividing by 100 within the logic to make sure that we're doing it for both our if statement values that we've asked it to return. And I'm feeling very comfortable with the results. And now I can add, move on, add categories, and keep manipulating until the report is exactly the way I need it. Any questions before we move on?
Did you say you're going to add one more list to this that has fast-paced schedule?
I can, yes. That has 2022 data is what I was looking for. Do you have one?
I gave you one, so is there anyone else that wants to add one?
Hazel down.
I'm sorry.
You can use Hazel down.
Can you
Yeah.
can you start spelling out the file ID for me?
Yeah. IN.L.
Breaking. I hope I'm not breaking up when I'm speaking to you, am I?
No.
Okay.
HAZEL.
Let's just start with that. You don't have to type the whole. So which one?
4. No, wait.
This one?
Yes, 4. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close some of this stuff. And we'll run the report. So now we should have, I don't know how many allocations that one had, but actually before we do that, we need to make sure we oops. I'm not going to do all of them, but we'll do a couple. Actually, I'm going to do it in the formula editor. To me, it's easier to get the allocation part in there and then just change my months, right? When I'm copying, instead of having to do the allocation over and over and over. Make sense?
Yep.
Let's take a complex situation and make it as easy as possible. And I'm just going to stop here and let's run the report. So we know we did the 2021 column. We did, you know, a few columns in the 2022, and we also updated the total net lease expense column for both the years. Now we have 3 leases. One has 11 allocations. One has 3 suites, but they're allocated at 100%. And I don't know what the last one was that we just added. What did we add? We added Hazel Dell MOB. It's 1 suite, but has, I'm assuming the 3 allocations is correct. 5280. Yep, looks correct. And it has 2022 data. But notice we stopped allocating in these columns, so it's still presenting the total, whereas this is the actual allocated amount. So we would just continue to make sure all the columns were updated to do the allocation calculation. But a good check. Oh, yep, missed one. Oh, I missed a few. And then I would go update them. Any questions? And I'm going to go ahead and do that before we move to the next thing we're going to do with this report. And then we should be able to wrap this report up and cover any type of general topics that you want to go over. I should have 2 more. And then my last one, oh no, this one too. Oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah, I can do that. So that was greater than 11. So this one I have to change a few things because it's greater than 11 and greater than 11. And this one already has the allocation calculation in it. Perfect. Let's run that. And then the next thing we're going to do is add a report total. So remember, this had no data for 22, so it's blank, but it did have for 21. We've already verified that those numbers were accurate. We allocated each of these that are not at 100% because it's 52, 60, 31, 16. Okay. So that's now allocated across all our columns appropriately. And then of course we have our one lease example that has 3 suites, but they were all at 100%. So we only have 1 line per. How's that looking?
That looks good.
All right. Well, I probably want a grand total as well. So let's go ahead and add that. Again, let me get this Zoom panel out of my way. And just a kind of quick tip that you can do once you've got all this set, so it's easier to work with the designer. This has got a lot in it. So, and it's wrapping, and it's kind of hard to get to the next, section you want to work with. So what you can do is you can highlight all of those and tell it to stop wrapping, and then come over to your row and hit set auto height. And now you don't have to look at that big wrapped formula. You can absolutely still double click and see the whole thing, or go to your format editor, but it just allows working with the screen so much easier on the end user. And again, what I did was I highlighted all of those fields in those columns, and I turned off the wrapping, and then I came back over and told it to set auto height. Okay. Now I want a report footer. It's very similar to the last session that we had on how to add that when we added the group footer. I'm just going to click in this section here, hover over add section, and this time I'm going to select report footer. A couple of different ways that you can handle adding an aggregate for the entire report. You can simply copy all of this and holding your control key, copy it down into your footer. Maybe make it bold, maybe highlight that entire row, put a title on it, grand total, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you want some background fill so it really stands out. You can do all of that with your formatting bar. Or you could have typed in, for example, equals. Now, when you're referencing a cell, it has to be in the square bracket and caps to reference. So in this case, it would be M5, N505. So either will work. We'll just go ahead and copy down the formulas from above, but it knows now that this is a report footer. So it will then aggregate everything that is in your department allocation row section. So let's run and see what those results look like. Right, so we have our grand total. It's highlighted for us. And now it's totaling everything in each of those columns. Any questions?
No, that looks awesome.
Now, what if Mary said, well, that's great, but John, I'm making John up, John wants to see, these are all the same. Let's see, Mm, 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 mm. Would company be different for those? Just to use as an example. Let's try it. Let's
Yeah,
say
different
Mary,
leases have different companies.
okay, cool. So let's say Mary says, well, this report's great, but I really need to see some subtotals by company. Because John needs, he doesn't want to have to figure that out himself. I don't really need, you know, a column that says in each row what the company is, but I would like a header that says the company, and then I would like a subtotal by company.
Actually, those three might all
Be the
be
same company?
They might be.
Let's check really quick. So we've got one of them open. The company is 2000 System Services. So that was that one. And then we had IN Stone. Nope, different. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. So obviously it's just not going to magically happen. You have to tell the report exactly what you want it to do. So we're going to go back into, we already have that particular category available to us. So if I was to select lease groups, company's already there. We just need to put it to use now. We can add it so that it shows up in each row, but I don't really want that. I actually want a header that says the company, and I want it in purple, and I want it 2 points larger than the font size that we're using in our department allocation row. And then I want it subtotaling. Well, in order to do that, we will want to, one, change our sort order so it's available for a group header and footer, and then figure out where that sort order should lie. So first I'll go up into report options, go to sorts. Now, because you can have multiple leases assigned to a grouping, I'm going to want that grouping to be my first sort order. Okay. So I'm going to go to my lease groups. And give me a second. My brightness just changed, which means my battery's running low. So we're going to plug in really quick. Make sure I don't die out on you guys. There we go. So I'm going to go to my lease groupings and I'm going to grab company and I'm going to move it all the way to the top because I want it to first show me the company and then all the leases that are in that company, all the suites that are in those leases, payments that are in those leases, and department allocations that are in those payments, right? So it's my first sort order in this case. And I'm going to click OK. Now that it's a sort order, it is available for me to add new sections to the report. And I want two, just to demonstrate to you how to add a header one and a footer one. So we've already done the footer, but we're going to do it again because this is going to be a subtotal. So I'm going to add a group header and I'm going to select that new sort field that I added, company, and click OK. And not only do I want it there, but I actually want to display the company and I want that to really stand out. So I'm going to make it a little bit larger. I'm going to make it bold, and just for fun, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to make it purple. All right, so we've got our header. Let's run the report and see what we've got. Sorry about the dog barking. The pains of working from home. All right. Ah, fantastic. I've got nice, big, bold, telling me what company these leases belong to. But I also want a subtotal. Now, of course, you can put spacing in between. If I wanted a space in between that and the detail. I want to add a new footer. So I'm going to do group footer. And I also want this footer to be by company. Now, if it happens to not fall in the right order of how I want this data displayed, I may need to click on that footer and tell it to move it up or down. I want it underneath my allocation detail. So I moved it down, and I'm going to insert another row so that I have a space between that detail and the total, or after the total, whatever your preference is. So I want this to tell me what company it's totaling and with some text that says total. So I'm going to do a concatenation again. So I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to drag company in after the equals. And I'm going to concatenate that with some text, space total, whatever I want that text to be. I can make it bigger, purple, whatever it is that I want to do. Okay, stretch that out just in case so it doesn't wrap. And then I'm going to want to do the same thing I did here, copy all of this down so that it aggregates let's make this bold and purple as well. So it aggregates at the company level. Let's run this. So now we have the detail we need by department allocation. We have a grand total, and now we have a header and footer by company because we sorted the report appropriately and we added the group header and footers that we needed to display the data exactly the way we wanted it displayed. Now, remember, the more logic that you add to the report's got to think a little more, so it will take a little bit longer to execute. But you'll end up with what you're looking for. All right, so we have 1,700 system clinical services. These are the leases that fall within that particular company grouping. And then we have what that grouping name is with the text total. And if we scroll across, we have subtotals for that grouping. Our two subtotals equal our grand total, and we are very satisfied. Does anybody have any questions on adding additional groupings to get more subtotals added to the report? No? Right, I'm going to save that. And all right, so let's take a 2-minute quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll use the rest of our time for general questions on how to do things or where you've gotten stuck with any of your practice or past reports that you've developed. Good. All right, I'm back. See, do we still have everyone?
I'm back too.
Here, present.
Still here.
All right, does anybody have any questions particular questions that they want to cover? Let's see, find the one that we were working on.
So when we also will need this same budget information for recurring charges that do not have a FASB schedule. So I assume we can use most of the similar concepts, formulas, etc., but just going to the payment schedule instead of the FASB schedule. Does that sound reasonable?
Somewhat similar. Not exactly. I got to find the report that we were working on. Hang on just a second. There it is. So somewhat similar. So let's just kind of run through that because it's not the same categories and you're going to have to filter more. So let's create a new report. And let's call this, because you're only going to want it for your base rent charges, right? Or you're going to want it for CAM and other things.
Yeah, we need it for everything.
But you don't want it for, hang on just one quick second. Oh, never mind. You don't want it for charges that went into the net lease expense report though, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what you're going to have to do for that is you're going to have to know from Master Fields Management. I'm just going to look up charge type. And you have two different charge types, one for equipment contracts and one for real estate. So I'm going to have to know which ones were flagged as FASB charges and add a filter to remove those from the other report, or else they're going to be on both. So BRN EQP, that's the only one for equipment. And for real estate, it's BRN RE, BRN RE1, CPI 1, and that's it. Okay. So just for the lack of a better name, let's call this non-FASB expense budget training report. And we won't be able to get through the entire thing in the remaining time. The concepts are all the same. Pointing to different data is what's different. Okay. We can leave it here in this folder. So the categories this time though, we're not going to be pulling from accounting. We're going to be pulling from portfolio insight, and we'll want lease general information. If we go to recurring charge, you're going to notice they're not enabled, because in order to get financial data into the system, you can't just have a lease. You have to have a space associated to the lease. So we have to bring in space general information. And then our recurring charge general information opens up. And then we want the payment schedule, not the rental activity, but the payment schedule, because the payment schedule is going to allow us to have the specific span of time. The rental activity is going to show you your rent steps in ranges, and we need period by period data. So we will want to bring in the payment schedule. Okay, so we're going to add that.
Really helpful to know understand the difference.
Yes, yes. So let's see if we still have a lease open. I think we do. Okay, so rental activity is your span of time rent bumps, right? From 2012 to 13, 13 to 14, 14 to 15. I can't build a budget off of that because it's giving me the amount, the period amount once, the annual amount once, and the per square foot. In order to build a budget report, I need every period's amount. That's the payment schedule. When this gets added to the system, it creates, I need to actually be in the charge. It creates the payment schedule, which you can see by going to linked forms and payment schedule. That's what gives you the period by period. That's what you need to build a budget report. Okay, so not rental activity, payment schedule. Now you'll notice that FASB allocation calculation is not enabled because we are not working with FASB data. We will need to bring in allocation calculation. We can again look up to see what's available there. Now, allocations at the recurring charge level only work if there is, it's only going to provide allocation data if there's a current amount for the period you're in right now. This is something that I need to go to development about and tell them that they need to allow for you to be able to allocate any period. So this could cause an issue with the data that you want in the report. But let's move forward and try it, and just know that there may be limitations here. All
Well,
right.
we typically don't set future changes and allocations, so it's all we can do is budget based on what it is today, and then when people want to change it, that's a manual thing we have to do. I don't think that would be a problem.
Okay, perfect. All right, so our sort order, same sort of thing. Let's do it logically how it goes into the system. The only difference is we're not working with one category that we're using the sorts from. We'll have to use each of the individuals. So we're going to do file ID from the lease general information. We'll go to space general information and pull in the suite asset number. We're going to go to recurring charge for the charge type. And then we're going to go to allocation calculation for the department code. So not dissimilar, right, to what we did in the other. It's just might have different names and is in different categories. And then we want the bill period from the payment schedule. So same sort order as the other report. They're from different categories and they may have different naming conventions from how the FASB schedule lays out the data. Now, as I mentioned, because you don't want those FASB charges to show up on this report, because this is the non-FASB charge, we will want to add a filter by recurring charge general information charge type. And we're going to make a list of the ones that we don't want included. So we're going to change the operator to is not one of, and then we can use the drop down to select each of those values. So we know that is FASB. We know that is FASB. We know that is FASB. And I think there was one other, I think it was CPI 1 that was checked off as FASB. So we definitely want to filter by charge type, okay? And filter out the ones we don't want in this case. We also are, just like the FASB version of the report, we're going to want to use an is between and select the bill periods we want. So we're going to bring in bill period, change the operator to is between. And again, this is 01/01/2021. And we'll put 12/31/2022. Notice this is filter value 2. We can move it up so that, you know, if we're thinking the same way as the other report, when we build our logic in our columns, we can continue to use filter value 1/1. Or if we know that it's filter value 2, we would use filter value 2/1 in our logic. So I'm going to leave it as the second one just so you can see the difference. But we've now filtered the report. And then in the layout, you can start bringing in some of the known fields that you want displayed on the report. And that might be, you know, file ID, lease name, etc. And I'm just going to add, let's add space and charge. And I'm going to, oh, let's add allocation too. Department code and percentage. And I'm going to go ahead and finish and we'll build the rest in the designer. All right, from our last report, we already know we don't want a detail row. We want to add a group footer based on our department allocation code. Click OK. And let's go ahead and shift all of them, click all of them to highlight them all, and then control drag to copy. Or we could have just moved it because we're going to get rid of that detail row. Do a little formatting. However it is that you want to format it. I'm going to do number, 2 decimal places, and append the %. And then we're going to need to build logic like we did in the other one. This will be a little more simplistic though, because we don't have to worry about lease classification, right? Financing and operating. So we don't have to do if and statements. We can just do an if statement. So it'll be a little less complicated. But we can also use some of the things that we built into this report and make it simpler on ourselves by copying and pasting. Except this would be filter value 2/1 because the date is in the second filter and so on. We'll just add 3 columns to save some time. So in this case, we need to compare our bill period to the filter value 2/1, right? And tell it to return the payment schedule amount and multiply that by the department code, etc. There is an allocated amount that you can use instead, but if the allocation doesn't show up, you won't have any values. So you'll have to play around with it and decide, do I want to take the actual payment schedule amount and apply it by the department allocation, so that at least I have a full population of all of my payment schedules, even if the allocation doesn't show up.
Yeah, because if we have payments that are paid like quarterly,
It might not show up, correct. So let's start out without doing the allocation first and just do if the payment schedule bill period equals, I'm gonna have to cheat a little bit and go look. Date value. I probably want this to be date value as well. Equals the date value of filter value to 1, return the payment schedule amount, or return 0. And I want this to ag sum. Right align it, 2 decimal places, and comma separator. This is going to give us a total of the full 24 months because we need to add the date add portion of it. Let me open this up in the formula editor. So we need to add the date add portion to the filter value so that it looks at a particular period and not all of the periods that we filtered, okay? So going back to this report, and let's do it in the formula editor. We need to let's change this from date value to date add. And we want month, single quote, month, single quote, comma. In this case, this would be 12. And we need to close that up. Let's see what we get. Oh, you know what? I don't want to run that for everything. Do we have a particular lease that we want to sample? Somebody wants to give me a file ID. So we only have about 8 minutes left. I don't think this one had any other charges, so that wouldn't work.
That MOB.
Actually, it has OPE, so we could use this one. And that was, whoops. We copy this. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we got nothing. Why? Close some of these windows.
Didn't that one end in 2021?
It does. So let's change, just for demonstration purposes, let's change this to start in the first month. So we get 2021 data instead of 22, just for demonstration purposes. So this would be 1. 1 instead of 14, 2, and 2. When in doubt, go back to the lease, right? And see, does data exist? All right, perfect. But look what we got. It's not actually allocating, right? It's giving us the total. So what we would want to do is, just like we did before, we want to times by the allocation percentage and divide by 100. I'm going to, again, copy and modify the easiest part, which is just changing the month add. I'm going to go to my report viewer options and take off simulating PDF and run the report. And there we go. Now, what happens when you do come across a situation where there's no allocation percentage coming up? You're going to end up getting some sort of, you may get an error. You can add additional logic to it that says something like, if percentage equals null, return just the payment schedule amount, right? Or return the payment schedule amount times the allocation. So there are additional things you can do for when you come across situations where maybe an allocation wasn't assigned or it's not populating. So just, you'll have to play around to get that syntax correct, but you can do things like that as well. And if you were building them so that they are very similar and maybe you could put them together, you would probably want to make sure that all of your columns were in the same placement, right? There's a change report that you can do. So I'm going to create a change report. And that's going to allow you to tell the system, hey, when I run this report, I want a tab that's got my FASB stuff in it and a tab that has my non-FASB stuff in it. And I only have to run one report instead of 2 reports or however many. If you're going to build it for your income leases, you may have the FASB expense, the non-FASB expense, and an income tab, right? So what you do is, where you go to create new reports, you click on chained. It's going to open up the chained report. It's kind of like a wizard. This does take a minute to open. And let's just call this chained report for training. and we'll stick it in the Indiana University Health. And then you go to the next tab, which is the reports tab. And this is where you select the reports that you want included, which would be our net lease expense budget training report and the non-FASB expense budget training report. It'll tell you the available exports. You can add additional filters and such, but you don't have to do that there. And then you can save. Any filters that you have set to prompt, like in this case, we had the, on the FASB one, we had the sortable period set to prompt. Let's go ahead and set the bill period set to prompt as well. Okay, so we can save and close this. So now you have a change report available when it's done thinking. What did we call it? We called it, there it is, change report for training. Okay. I'm going to pick Excel as my export because I don't think it would look very good in a PDF. And it's going to prompt you with those two filters, right? That they were both set to prompt. I'm good with the dates, right? But you could modify them if you needed to, but both of them are there. Tells you what report it's for, what field's using, the condition, which is your operator, and then your values. And I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to get an Excel workbook downloaded. It's going to tell you it's executing report 1 of 2, it's formatting, it's creating, and then it'll go to the second report. When it's done, it'll give you your output, and I'll have a workbook with 2 tabs in it. Now, of course, we have these filtered to only certain leases, but when you have less filters, you would have your entire population. Okay, it's done executing. I can now open that workbook. And I have my net lease expense budget training and my non-FASB. And I messed that syntax up. So that is all of the time that is allotted for the advanced training that we went over. I hope that you were able to learn at least a few things to make your life a little easier when you try to do the more complex financial type reports. I have no problem hanging out for a few more minutes to answer any questions that anyone might have. And I'm going to go fix that syntax error while I wait for a response.
Not
Not that I fully understood everything, but I don't have any questions at this moment.
Yes, practical experience is the key.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Thanks,
For sharing, I'll follow up with.
Did you find that the advanced sessions were definitely more than what the regular report builder training provides? Do you feel we got into depth enough on how logic in the cell works and how you can really format a report to your very specific needs? How categories and sortings work? Because it's pretty much what we covered.
Yeah, I think for me, that was a lot more in-depth information. And it's still going to take me playing around with it to really get it nailed down, but I feel like I do understand it better.
What's the most important thing when you're trying to build a very advanced, complex report?
Baby steps, right?
Baby steps. Good answer. Good answer.
It's all baby steps.
If I get an email and you're like, I just tried this and it's got 15 categories in it, I'm going to ask you if you took baby steps. Just kidding.
Noted.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can see how critical that is after going through the last 4 hours doing this, that you will not know where things went wrong if you try to do it all at the same time. My analogy of renovating your kitchen, it is absolutely not possible to have a kitchen renovated with every handyman in there at the same time, painting cabinets, installing countertops, installing appliances, putting your floors in, right? Same thing with reporting. Take it step at a time. And when things go wrong, you know exactly which handyman to point that to, right? In this case, the category or a filter you added or a sort order. And by doing it in increments, you're going to know immediately that didn't work and you can pinpoint it.
Agreed.
All right. Well, it was my pleasure. I hope this was very helpful. Please pray for me that the training session actually recorded this time and that I can send that to you. I think we recapped almost everything that we covered in our last session. So I really don't think that you lost much by not having the first recording. And you have the little cheat sheet, the formula cards. And then of course, you know, if you get stuck and you need help actually developing a report because it's just, you're spending too much time on it, or you just can't quite get it the way you want, contact me. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
It was really good.
You're very welcome, guys. Have a great rest of your week and happy Easter.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.